This is County Executive Steve Shue. You're listening to the Maryland Crabs Podcast.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Fernay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Fernay.
Hey, it's the Maryland Crabs, and we are back again here at the Commons. And it's after a post-debate hangover, I guess is what it would be called.
Yeah, I feel a big letdown.
You know, the debate was a lot of fun. Putting it together, I mean, that was sorry about the super long 2.5-hour episode that you
I'm not sorry.
had last week.
You guys aren't paying for this.
We're back to our hour this week, which is kind of exciting. But boy, I'll tell you, our episode with Gavin back in March, did that like kind of blow up?
I'm trying to figure if we should feel guilty about anything because I just feel guilty naturally. I'm Irish, so I think that I don't feel guilty.
No. Well, I'll tell you.
We were political pawns. That's what we were.
Yeah. I agree.
Panelides used us. I'm a rook or a knight.
Panelides used us. And I was amazed. The Capitol, they wrote an article on it, and they actually named us and linked us.
Through gritted teeth.
Rick must have been on vacation.
I think Rick's mad at us. I don't know.
But yeah, no, it was pretty impressive because Mike Panelides did a big mailer and his video on Gavin's Ferris wheel.
The video was funny. I'm not going to lie. I did laugh. It was pretty funny.
Oh, it was.
It was funny to me as well was Gavin's response on Facebook where he said there will be no Ferris wheel. And I felt like a dad telling us that there was going to be no trip to Disneyland. There will be no trip to Disneyland. Yeah. There will be no Ferris wheel. I'm like, oh, I kind of wanted a Ferris wheel. Why not?
You know, well,
if he said probably no Ferris wheel, I would have felt better.
I think it's funny, though, that you look at the divisiveness that whole issue caused, because I am still not 100% convinced that he wasn't serious.
Well, I think that...
And I mean, I get that he was throwing ideas out. This is, we need to have this. That just seemed a little too well thought out to me.
Like I said before, this is his brand. He is a out-of-the-box thinker. He's going to come up with ideas that seem kind of crazy because he's a marketer is really what he is.
Right.
I mean, look what he did down the Fringe Festival and the Chocolate Festival and the Dinner of the Stars. I mean, I know he had help with all those things. But that's his brand, is coming up with just crazy ideas and seeing which ones stick. So in that context, I think the Ferris wheel, sure. I mean, if you go, well, how are you going to pay for it? That's really not kind of the point. The point is he comes up with these huge ideas and winnows them down.
We're certainly not to the point where we need to figure out whether we need to pay for it. But maybe it makes sense to have the conversation of, does that make sense? Somebody needs to say, no, it doesn't. That's stupid. Then you move on. Or someone says, well, hey, maybe that requires additional conversation. I don't know.
Well, I think that if this is the apex of the arguments that we have as far as nastiness, then I'm pretty happy with it because Mike's campaign has to make hay out of this. I mean, you're looking for any chinks in the armor and you're exploiting any vulnerabilities that you think you see. So you got to kind of explore them. And this is one that I think the Panelides campaign thought they should explore. And really, I mean, this is fairly typical. I don't think it was nasty. I think this is just what you do, as opposed to dropping salacious tidbits about people and their past indiscretions and what have you that we had all this weekend when Ward 1.
Right.
Those are the ways I don't like to see it go, but unfortunately that's ingrained in our political culture. So really, we're going to have more coming over the next couple of weeks, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. No, I've heard of some other ones coming. So it'll be interesting leading into the election to see where it goes.
And you and I were talking before we started recording. I just don't like the mob mentality that has developed around social media, especially Facebook. We saw this, last year or a couple of years ago with the guy who owned the Steak and Shake up in Millersville and on Veterans Day. And you had literally hundreds, if not thousands of comments of people saying, shut him down, boycott him. And no one went to go talk to him. The same way when the whole Ellie Tierney thing kind of hit the paper this weekend, I saw that same kind of mob mentality. And it's just people who are very sure that they're right about something and very self-righteous. I'm not saying that it doesn't warrant discussion. I'm just saying that there's a lot of people who are pretty high and mighty, and it just bothers me. That's a part of social media I don't like.
We need to take a step backwards.
People aren't going to, though. The genie's out of the bottle. This is kind of where we are at this point. I don't like it.
That's true. Coming up today, we've got Dr. Dan Nataf, who's...
we spent a lot of time with him lately.
Yeah, he's our new BFF.
Yeah.
He's got great insight, and he has released his semi-annual survey.
What kind of survey?
The thoughts and everything of Anne Arundelians. Anne Arundelians?
We don't have a word for that.
No. Use guys. Yeah. No, that's taken. Jersey.
So there was this quiz the New York Times had. It was a linguist quiz, speaking of which, and it's this long questionnaire of like 50 questions how you pronounce this and what words you have.
Right.
It'll pinpoint exactly where you're from.
New York Times, yeah.
Yeah, and they said it's spooky.
fabulous.
Yeah, so I did it, and I am from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, apparently. But I mean, it's actually, they have a hotspot, what region you're in, and they said I'm most likely from Winston-Salem, but I am within the area, and this part of it.
When I took it, they got me pretty good. It was spot on with North Jersey, with South Jersey and Maryland.
Yeah.
So I picked up a little bit through my life, and that's sort of where it's been. But
so those surveys are pretty fun. Now, this survey that Dr. Nataf did is more kind of the socio-political map of Anne Arundel County, where people are with their thought process.
Absolutely.
Political approval rates.
I'm looking at a screensaver here, and we've got the London Eye.
Yeah, so we have a big screensaver that I'm talking, and John just keeps looking over my shoulder, which is starting to tick me off.
How beautiful would that be on City Dock?
But there's this huge screensaver that's about 52 inches long, and it's this like drone going over London at night, and there's the big Ferris wheel. And you know what? That looks pretty cool, actually. Yeah. I don't think that's bad.
It really does. But we're going to talk about the pulse of the Anne Arundelians and see what they have to think about all sorts of different things, politics, economy, drugs, and everything else with Dr. Nataf, who does a wonderful job on the survey every year. And he was just absolutely invaluable for the debate.
Yeah. He was great. Well, first of all, he was grown up as opposed to us, so he handled it pretty well. And going through the process with him, and we said the whole process of getting the questions down, we sat down with him for a couple hours one day, and then we got the questions ready on our own. And then John and I would go back and forth and argue a lot. And then we'd send them to our teacher, Dr. Nataf, who would then kind of redline it and send it back. So we kind of crafted all the questions, even though there's only a certain number or a certain kind of questions you can ask. I mean, all the debates have kind of the same questions because there's only 7 or 8 topics really that.
It was a procedure. But I will say that also, if I've been watching our ratings and stuff like that, and we're not getting enough of them on Apple Podcasts and iTunes or whatever you want to call it.
We've been getting the stars. We've been getting whatever it is.
Well, no, we've got the good stars, but we need more of them.
In the comments.
So if you're listening to this, just click over to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and give us a rating. Leave us a, review?
Quick review.
Wherever you get them, do them, because they are important. They help us grow. They help us get...
Yeah, they don't just feed our egos, which they don't, because I know you guys are doing us favors, but also it really helps with the algorithms that Apple puts out there so that when people are looking for podcasts, depending on the reviews and the keywords that are used, then it recommends us to more people. So it's for the sake of visibility. So we really appreciate everyone who gives us the ratings and reviews because it honestly does help us a lot. And do that the same for more power to you and the Annapolis Podcast and Annapolis Pint, all the other local podcasts, give them a little help too. Yeah, no, absolutely. And also don't just limit it to iTunes. I mean, if you've got a friend that might be interested in what we're saying, tell them, let them know about us and let them know about our Facebook page, the Maryland Crabs Podcast, or our Twitter is MD Crabs Podcast. Crabs Podcast. Yeah, why can we never remember that?
I know it's a tough one. And then, of course, our website is themarylandcrabs.com. And you can get in there. You can see all the episodes. You can see all the crab cakes and everything else that we've done there. We did one with Daryl Sturmer, who was the lead guitarist for Genesis, which was kind of fun.
Listen to that.
And Mark Crooks, the one that you did with Circuit Court Judge Mark Crooks,
he was a lot of fun. He really was. When you click with someone right away, when you kind of understand, here's Dr. Nataf right now.
Looking all over for you.
Look at you.
I've looked at everywhere except in this around the corner.
Oh, no.
We're in the comms. He's got a sheaf of papers. Well, why don't we jump right into it?
Wow.
Sounds good. Are you ready to jump into it?
I'm always ready to jump.
All right, there we go. Let's get your mic all situated.
Okay.
There we go.
Perfect.
So you're at the comms.
So how have you been?
It's been very busy.
You've got your survey out?
That is true, and that took up an enormous amount of time for quite a long period of time. It's like a month-long ordeal from sort of design into recruiting students and making sure everybody knows what they're doing and getting all the rooms situated and then getting preparatory materials together. Having the survey, conducting it at night and being there and so forth, and then going through a huge process of press release creation and then having it go through many eyes and you think that all the little imperfections are gone, but you always find one or two here or there. And so it's a never-ending process.
Now, how do you do that? I mean, do these, I say these kids, but the students of yours conduct the survey, correct?
They are the ones calling the residents of Anne Arundel County. That's true.
Now, are they at home doing these, or is there...
Oh, no. This is all all occurs within the Career Center. So it's a building on campus where we essentially have asked the faculty to donate their offices for an evening And as it turns out, it's usually 4 evenings. And so they provide us with the phones and some room on their desks. And the students are usually packed 2 to a room. That's what faculty have as an arrangement. It's usually 2 to a room. And so, they learn not to talk over each other and to kind of concentrate on what's going on.
How many students are doing it?
Well, on any given night, it's around 25. Could be a little more. And it's 4 nights. So some are repeating, so it's not 100 unique students that are doing that. It's probably something like 50 or 60 that are participating. Some do just 1 night. Some do 2 or 3 nights. It just depends on the arrangement with the faculty. The faculty member determines what kind of incentive they're going to provide. Some of them are doing it for service learning, and that's like a requirement. They get no extra anything. It's just they have to do it to pass the class. In my classes, I give them extra credit if they do more than 1 night. The minimum anybody does is one night. So
they're required to for your class.
Huh?
They're required to for the class.
It is required to pass my classes, yeah. Others, it just varies in terms of what the requirements or incentives are. I have for my students and the service learning students, you first step back. The service learning students need 20 hours of community service, and that's a lot of hours. And so even if they're spending 2 hours each night for 4 nights, it's only 8 hours. So we had to kind of build out the program. And so what I did is I added a first meeting where we discuss the nature of surveying and what it is as a methodology, how it works, the different ways in which you can survey populations, the kinds of errors that creep in, both statistically and in terms of design, the kinds of question framing and so forth. You just go through all that, and then you have them look at some prior results, because we've been doing this for years and years, and so we have lots of prior results, and then they can see something about what they can expect. And so this sets them up with a sense of where they're going. And then after that, they do their nights on the phone. And then again, my students and service learning students then have a final meeting. The final meeting, we talk about the process, what were their expectations about dealing with the public. Did they have strange respondents? I had one student said it took them 50 minutes to get through the 15-minute survey, mostly because this person wanted to explain every answer that they provided.
Oh, so he called my wife, did he?
I think it was a guy. Sorry. Oh, yeah. And so, but in any case, so sometimes it drags on. Sometimes it's pretty efficient. It really depends on both the student, how quickly they can read, how clearly they can read, and the respondent, how well they understand what's being said and their kind of mental engagement in the process overall. But at that last meeting, what we do is we look, first of all, it's a debriefing, then we look at general results, and then we have a hypotheses testing that lasts about 45 minutes. I make every student that's there offer a hypothesis, some relationship between 2 variables. So, gender and the Trump vote. Or I always start them out with income and education and try to get them thinking in terms of what does a hypothesis look like? Well, you kind of establish an independent and dependent variable, and let's look at education and income, which is likely to be the dependent variable. And so you can say, okay, income is the dependent variable, education independent variable. You throw a cross tab up, and you show them for every level of education, here's how they concentrate in terms of income levels. So I say, okay, you want to earn more than $100,000? You need a 4-year degree. It jumps up when you hit a 4-year degree, and you hit it's this household income, so it doesn't have to be an individual income, but it jumps up. So anyway, we see this, and then we go on to other variables, their variables, whatever they have as an area of interest. And so once they get the hang of it, I think, they like it, because this is fruits of their labor. They're seeing the results of the survey they just conducted.
I appreciated that in school too. Mm-hmm. When you, as opposed to just book smarts and lecturing and whatnot, to sit there and see in hand. Now, you've been doing the survey since
95.
95.
Yeah, me personally. The center's been kicking around since around 1980. So,
okay.
Yeah, it was created by the previous generation of social scientists.
Multi-generational survey.
Well, I'm the second generation. We're seeing whether the third one will exist, but I hope so.
So your sample size was around 533, I think it was?
553 in 553. This case. Yeah. Now, I should tell you that we have been trying to adapt to the changes in the sort of calling environment over the last decade or so. Since so many households now have cell phones, about 7 years ago, I decided to start asking people if once we reached them, whether it's through cell phone or landline, whether they would be willing to participate as a web panelist so that I can have them include them in these surveys without having to call them. And so I get about 40% of my calls. In this case, we did about 350 completions. And so 40% of them provided an email address. And so the next time I'm going to send them a solicitation to participate via email. So that gets me like 150 to 200 completions right there. Well, I don't have to work really hard, right? And so
now, would they be additional completions, or would they be?
No, I bundle them into the telephone. It's a multimodal thing.
I didn't know whether you were going to use that to be able to expand that to instead of having 500 and some.
No,
I mean
that's both together. Is 553 is both together. And so it's you get a different crowd online. The online crowd is wider, richer, and more well educated. And so, and as a result, it's less really representative of the general population than the phone calls respondents are. And so it wouldn't be a good thing just to rely on the online population. And it's weird because it's an exact subset of the same people we call. There's just 40-some% say yes to the question, can I get your email address? And there must be some sampling kind of process by which minorities, lower income, lower ed people just don't say yes. And so we end up with this skewed sample. So to kind of deal with all that, what I do is I try to hit 3 targets in my weighting scheme for the survey. And so the survey becomes weighted on party, on gender, and on education level. And when I put all 3 of those together, I started off with just putting in the raw data. I asked them, and I always like to try to find a question that I can use that has some real world number attached to it. It's not like some diffuse attitude where there's no real world number. And so I asked them, how did you vote last November for President Trump Clinton? And so I started off with a 10-point Clinton lead. After I weighted by those 3 variables, I got 37% on both sides, which was it's a 1-point difference was the actual difference, but you have to throw out some of the people who didn't vote and so forth. So 37% for both sides was an exact hit on the real world number. So this gives you some confidence that the rest of the sample, as it's now been weighted, is probably accurate in terms of a description of the general population. Okay. The other thing that I do, the other real world number that I hit, or at least that I use as a foil against which I judge the accuracy of what I've done, is the Gallup poll on presidential job approval. So I asked for job approval at the county exec, governor, and presidential levels. We obviously don't have anything systematic for the first 2. But for the president, Gallup asks like every day, sure. How's it going with that president? And so the last time I was out in the field, I counted on Gallup because we started on the 6th and we ended up on the 12th. So I took the 8th as a day for Gallup's, whatever it was on that day. And it was 36% job approval for Trump nationally. And we were at 34%. So we have been tracking almost exactly. It was weird because in Obama period, we would track below the national Gallup polling by a few points.
Which would make sense for Anne Arundel, which is typically a more Republican leaning.
It is. I mean, prior to Obama, am I saying this correctly? No, Obama didn't win. Obama didn't win either case. So prior to Clinton, right? She's the first one since LBJ that actually came in first as a Democrat. Now, again, she came in first in part because there were 5,000 write-in ballots and some, I think, 15,000 Gary Johnson votes that took away, right? Sure. And so, and Jill Stein. So it was a lot of fragmentation, and her vote number wasn't particularly high, but it was people on sort of the right that flaked away from the Trump ticket.
Well, you would have seen that again maybe in 92 with Ross Perot?
Yeah, but Clinton did not win Anne Arundel County.
In 92?
Yeah, okay. either 92 or 96, actually, did better nationally, because Perot wasn't really a factor then.
Right.
But even then, he didn't win. And so...
because Perot was the
Clinton,
first...
The wife was the first Democrat that came in first.
Because Perot was the first independent that made a significant, or at least in recent mind, made a significant dent in the electorate.
Yeah. In 92, he was definitely a factor. You know, political science will forever go down and ask, did he take more away from Bush than he did from Clinton or Democrats? And, you know, it's hard to know for sure, but all we know is that Bush was riding a 90% job approval during the Desert Storm, and he managed to lose.
What's the combination of all the polls? Is that Real Clear Politics that combines all the polls? And is that the most effective way to look at the polls? Because that's an average of all the polls.
You know, it's hard to know what the most effective way is to find the poll that tends to be right all the time and look at that one. But the Real Clear Politics takes, it does nothing to really account for House differences. You know, how it was one a digital voice recorder system, and so those can only call landlines, right? Okay. And so it excludes all the people who tend to be cell phone users.
So that'll be older.
So you're gonna be older, whiter, and all the rest.
Right.
And so and so that. You know, but again, the people who do that, Rasmussen polls are the most well-known, perhaps. You know, they weight it and they can make magic out of it.
It was the LA Times poll, I think it was, during the election, was a little bit different. It wasn't. What did they ask for? Was it likely voters?
Oh yeah, that's right. You like that because that was more accurate than the other.
Well, there was the USC poll. I think it was LA Times USC poll.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually it went too far the other way. In the end, because national polling, I mean, Clinton won, and they had Trump winning, so they were off.
Right.
And so they just went off the other way, and so their methodology was a little different, and you know, it kind of was a nice counterpoint to so many of the other polls, which had a hard time coming to grips with the erosion of the Clinton level of support, but. You know, she still won the part. You know, this is America, so you got to win the Electoral College. You shouldn't be doing national polls. You need to go to kind of purple states and do those polls. But generally, those don't have many polls. They don't do Wisconsin polls every 3 days.
Right.
So you know, you don't have a very good trend line to look at. And so it's hard to know, should you be quickly going to Michigan and Wisconsin and trying to shore up your vote, or, you know, do you go off to Georgia and Arizona and try to go play with them? And, you know, in hindsight, we all know, I mean, I hadn't read her book, What Happened, but in hindsight, we know that was crazy. She should never have gone off to Arizona and Georgia thinking there's somehow she's going to pull those off. But early voting kind of had it so close. It looked competitive there. And so based on that point in time, she went, this is why she blames James Comey with having lost the election, because she said, if I was doing so well back then, and, you know, look at Access Hollywood, I thought that was his undoing, she would have said to herself. So how is it possible in this world that against that guy with all the baggage he had, and I had this solid lead forever, that I lost? It can't be. And so I think she was riding on a certain complacency that came in because of the polling. You know, polling is kind of predictive, but it's snapshots in time. It's a rolling snapshot, right? And so if you're up here and you kind of like staying up there for a while, you figure, well, that's it. I've won.
I'm here.
But in her defense, no one would have predicted Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. I mean, that I mean, that was
Wisconsin and Michigan were both won by Bernie Sanders. Right, Bernie Sanders won both in the primaries. She should have seen that as a shot across the bow. Disaffected people not happy with establishment candidates, of which she was one. Again, we can go and talk about what would have happened.
But she wasn't. She was looking at Democrat. I mean, she's saying that those are thoroughly Democrat. She wasn't looking at the individual candidate. She goes, well, if even though I lost to my primary candidate, they're still going to vote Democrat because they always vote Democrat.
Yeah, but are they going to turn out?
Well, no one. That's what no one took into account, except for maybe Nate Silver. That was.
Well, he was sure that she.
No, he was too. But I mean, after the fact, he was
off. I mean, polling, all the prognosticators were not
pronounce that word.
To be admired for their insights. They basically went with the flow and thought Clinton was going to win right to the end. I mean, I did a PowerPoint. I generated so many different. I went to every source I could find showing that they were obviously way overconfident that she was going to win and Trump was going to lose, even in these states. I mean, some of them were very specific and said, "Here's this state, she's going to win." They're saying, it was a moment of tremendous hubris and self, assertion and confidence. But again,
but were those states? Was that a black swan event, or is that the new normal? Saying, hey, we have to rethink exactly how they're going to vote, and obviously that the blue wall is gone.
Yeah. It's hard to say to what extent this was a singular event. I mean, both she, as the first woman candidate, and the wife of a previous president, I mean, how many of those are we ever going to get? Right. And then a reality show casino entrepreneur as the opponent. That is a pretty unusual circumstance. So both sides, it's an unusual circumstance. So it has black swan qualities. There's no doubt of that. On the other hand, we also know that the Democratic establishment has not pulled together a very convincing record, really, since the election of Barack Obama. I mean, the 2010 election was a catastrophe. The 2014 election, a bigger catastrophe. And so they're not doing something right. There's something about the messaging and how they're defining their coalition, which is fine in some states. California, they win overwhelmingly. But when you're getting into some of these particularly kind of Midwestern states that had manufacturing and it's kind of blue collar white guys that are losing jobs and stuff, the coalition is not as obvious. And so that's why I think Bernie and his kind of call for a greater attack on inequality. It's not so much that Clinton didn't say things like that, but she didn't make him front and center. And there was a lot of identity politics and some economic justice. Sanders went the other way. It was economic justice first and then some identity politics. And I think in states like the upper Midwest, that's the better formula for Democrats to run with.
Because that's odd is because, well, let's look at Western Pennsylvania, for example, which I understand it's like a platypus when it comes to voters. That's a category all unto itself, is that they've traditionally been Democrats, but they don't have Democratic views. They're very conservative. So they would identify now as Republicans because there's been a shift, but they're also pro-union because it's a manufacturing area, or at least it was.
But there isn't. That's the problem, is that all these people were unionized in coal mills and steel mills.
They all identify
that.
They all identify as an industrial area, but then you say the Rust Belt, but there's really nothing there anymore.
But white workers, places where there are a lot of white individuals who are kind of working class and working in smokestack industries, those people are not a natural coalition mate with minorities and immigrants and all this. That's just scads of labor market competition and misplaced focus.
I don't understand.
Well, because their sense is, why am I losing my job and why are we catering to others? Why aren't you catering to me? Why aren't you solving my unemployment problem? This is why, coal country was Trump country. Uh-huh. Why? Because he could talk to them as the forgotten people.
And they are.
Yeah. I mean, here's the amazing stat. Okay. I mean, this is the amazing stat.
So you can talk about the number of coal miners?
No. Oh. No, there's only 75,000.
Yeah, but, well, that's not even miners. That's in the industry. That's truck drivers and equipment.
Yeah. So, but I looked at Clinton, Bill Clinton's vote in 1996, and then I compared it to her vote in 2016. So it's just a 20-year difference. Right? The state where she lost the most votes compared to his vote count in 96, the number one state was West Virginia. Huh. The second state was Arkansas, where he was governor. State. Right. So they became Davos, right? They became something else. They became the Clinton Foundation. And it just seemed like whatever roots they had in kind of Hope, Arkansas,
they pulled them up, and
they became Manhattan roots. And she was New York's senator, and true. So forth. And so there was this transformation of the people they were to the people they had become.
Maybe so, but then so you start looking at, you're by far much more educated than I am in this, but that would assume that the states, that the socioeconomic or even the political leanings of those states stayed the same in the last 20 years. So West Virginia has traditionally been Democratic, but they're not Democrats. They're certainly
not cultural Democrats.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying.
So you're just hanging on the economic side, and Trump was able to appeal to them on that side as well.
But also Fox News, if you look at Fox News was founded in 1996, which has become a juggernaut in the elections. So the people who are, I think if you go to West Virginia, if you ask anyone where they get their news, it's going to be Fox, even though, I don't even know if they're still registered as Democrat or Republican, but they've been Republican, at least, like you said, culturally, Republican, although Democrat in name. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if that's an apples to apples. There's a different world 20 years ago than.
Well, it was, but I'm just saying, we got two Clintons and 2 points in time. And to go from a state where you win to a state where you lose astronomically tells you how the world has changed in terms of the Democratic coalition.
Is there a Venn diagram between the Trump supporters and the Bernie supporters?
I don't have it. There may be one that shows overlaps. And I don't know to what extent.
Because you certainly saw
people who voted for Bernie and said to themselves, I won't vote for Clinton, I'm going to vote for Trump instead.
Was that by utility or was that because of philosophy?
I think, again, that the economic justice argument was buried in Clinton's coming out as the first woman candidate. And, she gets circled by all the culturally diverse groups of America, and that's her coalition. And so people who have fundamentally an economic justice issue, it's not a race justice issue that it could be economic, but it's just a plain old class issue. They're feeling like times are really hard. They're working too long, too many hours. The good jobs they had are gone. The unions have been pummeled, so forth and so on. That's the person who is on the margins of the Democratic coalition, and for whom it's not, again, if you look at her program, you'll see plenty of specifics about, moving into renewable energies and a zillion jobs that would be created by that, or transitional aid that would go for rebuilding skills and industries that have been adversely affected by trade. Those things are there, but it's not how you perceive her.
It's a marketing issue.
Yes, I think it's very much that.
Because if you think about Western PA and Ohio and all these areas when they're talking about the coal mines, I'm bringing coal back. That's 2 generations removed. Those, we're not talking about miners who are sitting out of work. You have people who are sitting there who are just sort of like in breaking away. He goes, Dad, I'm a cutter. He goes, you're not a cutter. I'm a cutter. But they identify with the coal country. But you have people in their 20s, 30s, 40s who've never been in the mine.
Sure.
So that idea of bringing these jobs back is all well and good. But you're not talking about people who lost their jobs when they shut down coal 10 years ago. And there's not a market for it.
I agree with you. The major hit to coal comes from some combination of automation and fracking.
Yeah, but for him to come and sell that's brilliant, because Trump is, you can say what you want. He's a brilliant marketer. He tells people what they want to hear in the terms they want to hear it. Yeah. He's very good at that. Yeah, and she may have been economically sound in what she was offering, but it's not sexy.
No, I agree with you. I think that his ability to mix it up. I went to a Trump rally in New Hampshire, and he didn't sound like any Republican I'd ever heard. And so you could selectively hear things there that would appeal to you, both in terms of kind of social safety nets and other things that he wasn't going to mess with, as well. And he had the whole swamp argument, right? This whole thing that he was the swamp, he knew the swamp, and he was going to pull the plug on the swamp. And so trust me, right? Just believe me, all these words, right? And so I think that because he had this just strange strange persona and this weird admixture of positions. He was almost like a third party onto himself.
There's someone said, I think it was Pod Save America, but they had a great thought about the Trump rallies. They said it's basically you're going to watch him do his greatest hits, that there's a rhythm to everything. He starts off with lock her up, then drain the swamp, and then, he yells, build a wall. Who's going to pay for it? Everyone shouts back, Mexico. He said that, but and then people get bored halfway through and start filtering out. But it's sort of like going to see Leonard Skinner do Freebird. He said, but every one of the polls every one of these rallies are the same.
That's true. Hey, I'm going to go grab a glass of water. Why don't we take a quick break? And when we come back, let's see if we can bring this back to Maryland a little bit and talk a little bit about Maryland and see what's going on here.
Very good.
When you're a community bank, you help your community however you can. Like being there for local business people, backing them up when they start up, advising them when they ask, standing by them so they can grow. Helping local businesses is one of the most important things we do at Severn Bank. I'm Alan Hyatt, chairman of the bank, but I'm also a proud supporter of businesses in Anne Arundel County. You know we never forget that here at the bank, we're a local business too. We face the same challenges and opportunities as any business, and we know how fortunate we are to have customers who stand beside us. That's why we stand beside you. If you have a business or you want to start a business, talk with us, because we're banking on you. Severn Bank, here with you.
Online at severnbank.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender. Severn Bank is a trade name used by Severn Savings Bank.
And we are back here with Dr. Dan Nataf, who is the director of the Center for the Study of Local Issues. I'm going to get that right at some point.
I know, it took me a year or two.
At Anne Arundel County Community College.
That's right.
Who was with us on primary night, who was indispensable for our debate when we had it with Mayor Panelides and Gavin Buckley a couple of weeks ago, is here with us. And we've been talking a little bit of national politics.
I think he and Jared Lippman could have taken over the podcast for us that night and done a better job. They were chatting along the way for a while. You guys are really good.
Yeah.
Enjoyed Jared's.
One of the key things of the survey that you do is the local issues, and you're the Center for Local Issues.
That's right.
And in reading the article in the Capitol, it said obviously, well, maybe not so obviously, that drugs were the biggest concern for your respondents this time. Was that a surprise to you?
Well, it's not a surprise insofar as last time we hit almost exactly the same numbers, but it's up a lot from 1 year ago. In other words, we do these twice a year, one in spring and one in fall. So spring, the movement had been essentially between fall of last year, 1 year ago, and spring. That's where the big rise in concern for drugs and sort of crime drugs, it occurred in that 6-month period. And it was stable. In other words, it didn't change for fall of this year. And so now it's like the stable number one.
I think that kind of probably corresponds with how the crime and the use of the drugs that we're seeing on a policing level goes as well. Because for a while there was nothing there, and then all of a sudden it jumped up. And again, year over year, we look at the county, it's up, but it's elevated, but it's not this huge leaps, but it is still climbing, and it's still a concern there.
I'm looking at the chart right now. I have it up here on the Apple TV. So if we look at the last 7 surveys, so that's from fall of 14 to fall of 17, and you have a line graph here that shows you exactly how it is increased or decreased as far as the most important problem as a perception. Right. So you have two taxes that are too high, transportation, crime and drugs, growth, development, economy, environment, and education. And what you see here is issues such as taxes too high plummeted from 3 years, plummeted from the top concern to looks like almost the least of the concerns.
Like just in the middle there, it's all bunched up.
Right. But if you look at drugs, that went from the middle of the pack 3 years ago to by far the most important concern.
It's startling. I mean, and now, it's the case that the economy dominated for years. And so the atrophying of concern over the economy has to result in something else going up. And it could have been just evenly distributed, but it wasn't. I mean, it could have just stayed at taxes. I think the tax issue was, if you will, cured by Hogan's election. And so
when was he elected? He was 14.
It was in 14, and you can see
fall of 14.
It starts going down in spring of 15, And then by fall of 15, it's already plateaued. The taxes have plateaued at a kind of lower level, and it kind of just keeps going down. But I mean, it could have stayed at that kind of low double-digit level had there not been something else going up, and that's what drugs were doing. So people, this is an unprompted question. The students simply ask, what's the most important problem facing residents of Anne Arundel County at the present time? That's what they ask. They don't read any list.
One of the most frustrating things for me as a news junkie was watching Newt Gingrich on election night, or actually, I'm sorry, it was after one of the debates, one of the presidential debates. And Newt Gingrich was with, I can't remember which CNN commentator it was. And he said, people are more worried about crime. That's at the top of their list. So people are afraid. And there was a kind of a terse moment between the commentator and Gingrich about that. She said, crime is at a record low. And he said, but people don't feel that way. And she goes, but you people are saying, talking about the campaign, that crime is a larger problem than it is. And he goes, but people feel that way. And the frustration to me, and probably to a lot of people, were that you saw this narrative of crime out of control being pushed when the statistics show that it is not the case.
Here's what I would say to that. I don't know that concern over drug use is the same as concern
over crime, which are lumped together on the question.
Here, they're discrete. I put them together because it kind of has historically been, illegal drugs, and so it's illegal things, right? But I think that the current wave of concern over drugs is much more health concern than it is driven by a kind of sense in which we got to go get those drug dealers, and that's the crime part. It's just the propensity for people to die from overdoses because of fentanyl,
which has been on the rise.
I mean, that's the problem. I mean, there are twice as many people who die a year in Baltimore City from that than die from being shot and murdered. And so it's a rising and significant concern as a health issue. This is why, and I mentioned this in the press release, we asked about a needle exchange program. All right. Now, Anne Arundel County is probably not a perfect melting pot for generous ways of dealing with addicts, right? You would think that they'd be kind of personal responsibility. This is something you could deal with.
Because it's right leaning and it's personal responsibility.
Well, it can easily be perceived as just bad choices.
Right.
And if you want to, you could stop.
And often it is.
But on a needle exchange program, even when I was explaining this to my students, they're going, huh? We're providing clean needles so that addicts can avoid getting contaminating others with HIV and who knows what else. Right? This is like giving up. It's saying this is going to happen. Addicts are going to be addicts, and we can't move fast enough to remove their addictive habits. And so all we can do
is
contain it so it doesn't become an even bigger health hazard. Right?
Well, also, that's a cheaper solution. I mean, clean hypodermic needles in an exchange program is far cheaper than prevention problems and treatment problems.
Sure. That could be, and maybe the penny pinching mindset of Anne Arundel County folks said, oh, yeah, that's a better sort of choice. But it still seemed to me that was a pretty high number. Got a majority in favor of that.
I thought that's unusual. I saw that in there because that's something that I didn't think of. I mean, you've got all the talk about the safe stations and treatment, and the police have every jurisdiction has come out and said, we're not going to be able to arrest our way out of this drug problem. Right. We need to get a hold of it here. And it's not necessarily, giving them clean needles to do it. It's giving them the help that they need to help themselves.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was kind of fascinating because that needle swap seemed like an arcane idea to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to my mind, it was just a cry of desperation. Right. If we're willing to go with that, that just reinforces the idea that this is a big problem, and the public is just grasping for solutions.
Well, it's also, I think it's important to remember that this is perception. This isn't so we're looking at these lines here. They don't indicate real issues. So, I mean, 4 years ago, if you had said, what's the largest problem? You'd see on this, maybe not on this, but on a national one, Ebola. Because 4 years ago or 3 years ago, everyone was fired up that Ebola was coming. They were talking about shutting down airlines from Africa, but didn't mean that there was an actual issue. It was just the perception of a problem.
Yeah, but I think with the opiate stuff is much more.
No, I agree with you on that.
I mean, I asked a year and a half ago, I asked people, do you know a friend or family member who's got a dependence on prescription painkillers, heroin, coke, marijuana, and alcohol? The leader was alcohol, but prescription drugs was, I think it was next at 16%, 31% said alcohol, 16% said prescription drugs, and 11% said heroin. That's one out of, you're in a room with 20 people. That's two people who know somebody.
Anecdotally, I lived my life for 52 years without knowing anybody that was directly impacted by heroin and opioids. In the last 4 years, I have 4 friends that have lost kids because of it. And I know others that are still struggling and dealing with their kids. And you read about it day in and day out. I mean, just this morning in the newspaper, they're talking about Sheriff Bateman's stepson had an opioid issue and threatened him. So now,
allegedly.
Well, according to the police report.
Allegedly.
But
I'm not getting sued
that is a problem, though. Yeah. 20 years of heroin. No, that's just the homeless the few homeless guys on the streets of the big city that are shooting up needles. Was my impression of it. But now it's in Severna Park. It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's mainstreamed, right?
The other issues that kind of surprised me was that the most important problems list, that you saw the economy plummeted as well from 14 to now, that steadily too. There's no spikes in there that fell from the top of the list of people considered to be an issue, and growth and development saw a significant increase as perception of the problem.
Yeah. The economy on a lot of different indicators seems to be doing, pretty well. And it's not just objective numbers like the unemployment rate, but it's
like 91 straight.
I ask a lot of questions about the economy, and on virtually, just the rating question, how would you rate the economic conditions in, and then we say county, state, and country. And all of them are going up. Even the country went up. It's like...
Well, here's a question for you on the economy, which is, we've often been said that Maryland and Anne Arundel County and whatnot is somewhat insulated from the ebbs and flows of the economy because of our proximity to Washington and the workforce and everything else. Do we have an inflated sense of the economy here, whereas somebody in West Virginia would be like, oh, God, no.
We're more optimistic, you mean, because we've not felt any of the effects significantly?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
Yeah,
like if you ask this question.
Government is a big employer, and as long as the D.C. metro area includes a fair number of people from Anne Arundel County who either commute to jobs right in and around D.C. or go out to Fort Meade, and that's become, a Gold Coast of employment of all sorts. Those are buoying the local economy and insulating it from the drama of the national economy. We're not a county that is really deindustrialized. We haven't had a point. I always find the startling statistics. In 1940, 75% of the people in Anne Arundel County lived in Annapolis.
Wow. There's a statistic.
It's a startling statistic, and now it's less than 10%. So all these people came in as basically suburbanites, right? They flowed in after World War II and went down Ritchie Highway and populated it from Baltimore, and
which mirrored the rest of the growth of suburbs from that time. That mirrored the growth of the suburbs from around the country at the same time.
Sure, yeah. But I think the point is that we're not a place which had smokestack industries, and those then went down, boom,
right.
And we had to reinvent ourselves. We were agriculture, we were the state capital, and then agriculture. And so what we invented was the post-war economy, and we had the good fortune of having, big government come into our lives and provide, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of jobs regionally. We're
directly or indirectly. Lobbyists, support groups,
even support. The old saying, Fed, Ed, Med, right? You go federal government, educational institutions, and lots of medical things.
And we have all that.
And so, not so much Anne Arundel County per se, Maryland does, but we have a significant part of it. You got AAMC and Baltimore, Washington as medical. They have two important medical centers.
That's interesting. I never thought about that.
You got BWI, you got the Naval Academy.
Pittsburgh, which was industrial, obviously, classically, and they got walloped in the 60s and 70s. In the late 80s and 90s, they reinvented themselves as a medical center. And they've really kind of come back from that recession that just plagued them them for decades.
And they had Carnegie, Mellon, and other schools there.
Yeah, Pitt and all that. Yeah,
they need that, the ed part. If you haven't got ed, you can't. It's hard to reinvent yourself because you can't bring in. Even Anne Arundel County is a kind of a funny place. Like I say, right now it's tracking nationally. In my polls, we're tracking Gallup within a point or two. So it's not like this is Trump country, even though, a year ago, if you'd asked me, I say, kind of characterize Anne Arundel County, I'd say it leans on a conservative way. The party registration numbers are actually more to advantage of Democrats. But you get a lot of unaffiliated military types who tend to be pretty conservative. And so you add them all together, and it sort of leans a little more to the right than it leans to the left. But how do we then get ourselves at 35% on Trump approval and compare that to Hogan approval at 75%? It's not a party. I mean, it's like this is two different personalities, two different ways of approaching government. And, one is talking to those forgotten people out in Rust Belt and all this other. Another, that's just not who he is, right? It's just that he's a different persona and he has a different kind of way of approaching. And he's not, pursuing this ultra conservative agenda that Trump is pursuing.
What do you think? Do you think Hogan distancing himself? And I wouldn't say he necessarily distanced himself, but he's just sort of keeping Trump at arm's length.
Right.
Is helping out that 75%.
Yeah, he's playing, like I say, he's kind of got it going both ways. On the one hand, he wants to say, I'm the guy who's going to be the counterbalance of the Democratic General Assembly. It's going to want to raise your taxes and provide services to everybody, they can think of. Well, I'm not going to let him do all that. I'm going to be the hedge, right? And so that's a position that I think, again, Baltimore County has got 1 million people in it. They kind of like someone like that. That's an appealing kind of view. I mean, Kevin Kamenez on his stump speech talks about the fact that Baltimore County hasn't raised its taxes in 25 years. Right. And so it's like he knows what's out there, and he got to appeal to that. So he, as a fiscal conservative, Hogan is able to play that angle well enough. I don't know that he's really changed the dynamic of spending, the amount of spending in the aggregate, but he seems like his heart is in the right place. And so a lot of persuadable purple voters kind of go, oh, I don't mind that. On the other hand, I think he understands that a lot of the programs that keep Maryland in place can't disassemble. And so he's not going to go out and kind of tear them apart and just have a war on the Democratic legacy of the last.
Well, you find that with any kind of a newly born politician, that they find out that all of a sudden the things they can't disassemble that they thought. I mean, I know Trump has come in and obviously run into his walls. You look at Hogan, he certainly has. I mean, Bush and Miller came out of that session equal winners as Hogan did on some items. Yeah. I mean, they gave and whatnot. Mayor Panellides did as well in Annapolis. He says, oh, we're going to do this. And I'm like, yeah, no, you can. It's not the way it works.
So I'm looking at the chart here, which is the right direction percentage for county, state, and nation from fall of 12 to fall 17. So 5 years. And it's kind of interesting. So we have 3 lines, which is, are we going in the right direction? You have the nation, the state, and the county.
Right.
So fall of 12, which was the election. So there's a plummet as a nation, are we going in the right direction? And then it goes back. It creeps back up over years.
Fall of 12-13, I think, was the sequester. One of the sequesters created that drop.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So now we look at state, and so fall of 12, the state...
Or it's a shutdown of government. It's not... Sequester was part of it.
Gotcha.
The shutdown of government when the Republic...
Was it that long ago? Wow.
Yeah, if time flies.
So is the state going in the right direction? That's crept up since 12.
That was the Hogan effect, right? 27% was O'Malley's job approval in fall of 14. And that's where the state was in right direction, 27%.
Gotcha.
Two were the same.
Because that was also, I'm trying to remember when the taxes and fees, because that was an unpopular move where we were told, pass the referendum on table games and gambling, or we're going to have to raise taxes and fees. So we all passed it and we got taxes and fees, and I think that really hit him hard.
I agree.
But if we look at the county, that has remained pretty consistent.
Stable. Yeah, it doesn't really go up and down much because I don't, it's interesting because you'd think something must affect the county. I mean, you see little jumps and variations. I don't have it on this chart, but I do have a different chart which shows that during part of the Leopold administration, we saw the biggest drop, and that was right in tune with the scandal that was unfolding. Which one?
You had that chart up a little bit earlier. It was the two opposing ones heading in the right direction.
Right here.
There it is. Where the two lines almost meet.
Right. You can see the one when it drops to 43% for the county right direction. That was a Leopold moment. And then he jumped back up, get rid of him, and we're back to 50%.
But you find that to be kind of the case generally, is that we remain fairly consistent in the county? We're fairly...
Yeah, I think because, again, the county doesn't experience wide swings in general situation. It stays pretty steady. And again, a lot of it is due because of maybe over-reliance on government work, provided directly or indirectly by government, the federal government, military, something. And so we just don't have lots of ups and downs. Like I said, I think that the Hogan moment was well appreciated. Anthony Brown got 32% of the vote. Right, he got 32%. A Democrat in Anne Arundel County needs to get 38%. You can't win. That's your statewide.
Your rule of thumb.
That's the number. Well, I did a regression where I regressed Anne Arundel County on state outcomes overall, and that was the number you have to hit. So he was 6 points below his target number. And he lost by, I think, 4 points, 3 or 4 points.
And do you think that was a referendum on O'Malley's job performance?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I think there was kind of O'Malley fatigue. Some of the reasons you alluded to, the things that sort of happened under O'Malley, where he was dealing with the Great Recession and trying to keep programs up, keep ed spending up, and so forth. So he went and raised taxes, and people like the spending. I always say people are liberals on spending and conservatives on taxation, and so he went to his left. By trying to keep up the level of spending during a period when revenues were going down, so he had to extract more and wasn't appreciated. Again, Hogan has been unusually lucky because a buoyant economy has generated enough revenue to do it all.
So we have, I think I said weeks before, but it was 91 straight months of growth, economic growth.
Strong growth, reasonable revenues. You don't have to be the bad guy, right? You don't have to go and start talking.
You can leave taxes where they are because the assessments are going to go up after the...
I mean, there's, depending on the nature of what taxes you're relying on, but even on state income tax, as long as people are employed, they're getting a salary, and boom, there it is. Their income tax just holds up because of employment.
Is there anything that surprised you in the survey this time?
It's a surprise is always an interesting word.
I use it as much as I can.
It's a journalist's pet word. We did some stuff on perceptions of discrimination. We had never done those before. And I didn't really know what to expect. I created a bunch of categories of obvious and not so obvious targets of possible perceptions of discrimination. So what turns out to be the most discriminated group that, they had a lot, some, little or no, right? Those were the three choices. The most discriminated group with the highest percentage saying a lot was
tall, gawky white guys.
Transgendered people.
And that's funny. The Maryland State Police just released the statistics for 2015 yesterday on that. And I don't have the numbers right here in front of me, but transgender was like the least discriminated. The most discriminated as far as demographics were white males for whatever reason.
We asked about white males.
Followed by black, gay, sexual orientation was one of them, transgender, and then it jumped down into like religious and whatnot as far as the number of incidents.
We asked a little bit of all that. Again, the leader was transgendered. 53% said a lot. And it was also the case when we asked about Trump's policy of banning transgendered people from the military. I think that got the lowest level of support of any policy we asked about. So
even from the right, which is surprising.
Yeah, I mean, this was just a loser issue. That and the DACA issue were kind of loser issues. And I don't know why. I mean, transgender came out of nowhere. There's no particular, nothing that he said during his campaign that said to me, if this guy gets elected, he's going to ban transgendered. I just never recall that as any part. So he just picked that one as a soft target, but it was a horrible target because the public opinion just isn't there. And DACA is more along his lines, immigrants and all that.
Sure.
But he was, kind of conflicted about it since this is the kids, innocence and so forth and so on. And that, I think, is how the public generally sees it. These are innocents. You can't really blame them for the sins of their parents and on and on and on. Mm-hmm. But in terms of discrimination, the second most discriminated group were African Americans, and they were in the 40s. And then you can see the rest of people with a criminal record. How many people think of them as a discriminated group? But the public sees it that way.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then physical and mental disabilities is still up there.
That surprises me.
It's something, it's not apparent. You just don't think about, is discrimination the right word?
That's what I was thinking too. Is just, do they face a lack of accommodation? Maybe that's something, but that one actually does surprise me.
Yeah, and then at the bottom, you're getting...
Native Americans is interesting to me because there are really not a lot of Native Americans.
That's right. This is an empathy thing and a kind of historical thing, but it's not like a reality where you see something.
I didn't see any real Native Americans till I moved to New Mexico. That was the first time in my life where I saw Native Americans in real life. Everything else was conceptual because there's no reservations on the East Coast.
It's not very common.
So atheists and white men rounded up the bottom.
Atheists and white men. So
I don't know, man. You try and get elected as an atheist.
More discriminated again by 4 points if you had the two top categories.
You could not get an atheist elected into any elected office.
I agree, and on the online part of the poll, there I allow people to comment, and so there you'll get people who'll rant about something.
Oh, those are my people.
Well, you'll get them. Some people said atheists are the most discriminated people. They're worse than Muslims. They'll make that explicit comparison and say, they couldn't be, they're repudiated you can't get maybe in Berkeley you could get an atheist elected. Or
even then, even people who are far to the left, they draw the line at atheism because that's just crazy to them.
I don't know. But we had a reasonably large group. I think the atheist segment is growing and it's younger.
They said that in 10 years, I saw there was the report today that in 10 years that 1/3 of the country will identify as non-religious because that is the fastest growing.
Churches are having a tough time left and right. They're getting people in, their monies are down.
Millennials especially, for that reason.
Hey, look, as we start to wrap up, I got just a couple questions that burn in my mind here.
Okay.
And I'm looking at you with County Executive Shu as having a very good approval rating.
It's gone up.
Best that he's had.
Yeah.
And we don't have any other questions regarding county executives, but we did on the governor. You got Governor Larry Hogan. You talked about other people that may be running as a Democrat, and you named that Ben Jealous, Kevin Kamenetz, and Rushern Baker as being the top three.
Right.
Others there. Is this indicative of looking at your past polls the fall before an election? Does this correlate with that? Have you ever looked at that?
That's a good question.
Taking a look at this, I would sit there and say, okay, well, Hogan's going to win it. And then on the Democratic side, if in a primary, it looks like Ben Jealous is going to get that.
Yeah, it's really, really early. I think that without really much of a campaign, it's very hard to predict how it'll all shake out.
Right.
And so
spring probably be better.
Yeah, we'll know more by spring because then we will have campaigns, ads, and so forth, and rally and candidate events. And so right now, we got more people who say I don't know than say they're not voting for Hogan, but when asked, well, then are you voting? I don't know is their answer. And so, again, because we're so kind of tightly woven into the political scene, we somehow get the illusion that most people are. Most people aren't.
No, they're not. You're right.
And so, they spend nanoseconds a month thinking about, who's up, who's down. And all
I'll
this
let you know on November 7th, but when I walk in.
I'll make the decision the last week or two. But why are you asking me now? It's a year and a half before the election. You've got to be nuts. And they're kind of right.
Well, the data in here is fascinating, and we'll make sure that we put the document actually up when we put the show notes on the website and everything else. But is this done in other counties that you're aware of?
No. I think we are the only community college in America that does these regular polls every semester. I don't know of anybody else that does it.
How valuable would that be if Howard and PG and hope I don't say PG, I got yelled at from Western Prince George's County,
Absolutely.
But all of the counties put them together, and then had, maybe the brilliant minds, the Dr. Dans of every county would come together and come with a statewide.
I mean, it would be a great thing to have happen because we could theoretically coordinate, have some common questions and then have some really localized questions, and then we can compare where we are on the common questions and then let the locals do their own thing.
Well, it'd be fascinating to me. You talk about the drug issue here, okay, which has been sort of a non-issue in Anne Arundel County for so long, the opioid issue. And now all of a sudden it's at the forefront.
Right.
I'm going to, without knowing, I'm going to say that in Baltimore City, it's probably a routine thing that's been going on for decades.
Possibly. Yeah.
And it's like, I'm just worried about.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get a lot of poverty issues, things that are evocative of the life of people in poverty in Baltimore City, and you're just not going to get it here. It's like homelessness. It's probably politically incorrect to say we don't have much homelessness. But I think if you go to Baltimore City and ask what's the dimensions of homelessness there, it's vast. And so Anne Arundel County just doesn't have the kind of, ghetto-like qualities that you see in a place like Baltimore City. Not all of Baltimore, but there are clearly areas like that.
Right. So, how do you select? I mean, can anybody volunteer to get on this, or is this just totally at random?
You mean as a person called?
As a respondent.
Yeah. No, we get our numbers from a company that generates, goes to listed white page numbers, adds some unlisted numbers, and then throws in some other numbers. I ask them numbers that are associated with for people between 18 and 40. And those are, they're not purely random numbers, but they're numbers that they have pooled together, these great repositories of databases where they can give you the name, the address, and the age of the person. And so we blend both databases together, the white page listed, the unlisted, and then these others, which do include cell phones. And so by putting them all,
which is probably a great thing now.
Well,
everyone's cutting the landlines.
You can't do landlines only anymore unless all you want to know is how retirees feel.
Now, do you pay for your data or for the numbers? Is that
I pay for some. The landline numbers I get free from the same company because they see it as some altruistic mission to give people like me the ability to do this without.
You got them fooled.
Yes, I hope they're not listening. But it's not really fooled because it is what it is. And so no one's going to pay. We're not contracted out to do this. If I contract, I'm not got a contract with the library system. And so we do private work for usually government organizations, and they're paying me. I build in the cost of acquiring whatever it is. In this case, it was just addresses because we're doing not a phone survey but a mail survey. So we pay for that, and I don't expect them to generate those free. It's not. There's nothing. There's no reason to. And so, but yeah, they're a good company. We try to get all our data that we pay for from them.
Well, I'll tell you, this is a fascinating study. You can get more, and actually, we've got a weird web address, but it's www.2.
Right.
AACC.edu/CSLI, which is the Center for the Study of Local Issues.
That's right.
Nailed it.
Very good. You got the acronym.
Dr. Dan Nataf. And take a look at this study, and we will put it on the website.
It's actually, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And to get an insight in the minutia of the lifestyle, really, that we have here in Anne Arundel County, not your next door neighbor necessarily. Well, maybe, but what our communal neighbors are really thinking and how, where it is. It'd be kind of interesting. I always look through and go like, oh yeah, no, I don't think that. And, try to figure out where it makes a lot of sense and where it doesn't. But it's a fascinating study. It comes out twice a year from Anne Arundel County Community College, and the only one in the country, I've learned.
That is my impression. I don't know of anyone else who does regular every semester polling.
How much time does it take you to do this? You personally,
takes hours and hours it takes hours and hours for days and days. And so, there's a big buildup. First, we have to design the survey, and that is a lot of effort and gnashing of teeth and so forth and so on. I really have a process with an advisory board, and I meet with them a first time, and I throw out a draft, and we talk about it. Then a week later, I've edited it and taken their advice, and then I give them another draft. We talk more about it, and then kind of we're getting pretty close to that point. Then it's sort of in final edit by the time I incorporate whatever suggestions they have the second meeting. And so then the student recruitment phase takes place, and make sure we have enough bodies to staff the phones.
Right.
And then it's writing the press release, and that's done over a weekend, a long weekend, where I start with the data kind of massaging, weighting, as I was mentioning, on Friday. That takes a while to get it weighted just right. And then Saturday, Sunday, and part of Monday goes just to writing it. I mean, the thing's almost 60 pages long. So, I'm writing, 15,
it's not a
like
1-page cover sheet.
Yeah, I mean,
there is a Cliff Notes version.
Yeah,
but
there is. So, I don't want people to be afraid, but, to get a lot of the longitudinal stuff, these questions that over years we've been doing them, and trends and all that, you got to update the charts. You got to say what's new about them and so forth. So it takes me 3 kind of full days of writing to get that all together. And then it's finally done. It goes for kind of internal approval and little minor edits. And then it goes out first to the Capitol and then the rest of the world. And then I come on to shows like this and talk about it.
To do the circuit.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, that's it.
Dr. Nataf, again, as always, thank you very much. Always good to see you.
Yeah, it's a blast.
Seems like we've seen an awful lot of you. Hey, you want to do something on election night?
I have already told...
don't pull this whole wife thing into it again, okay?
Jane is not my wife, but I promised to stay with her some period of time.
She can come. There, solved.
There it is. I think if she could get paid to come, she would.
John will pay her, yeah.
But, that'll be the challenge. So, I don't know. I mean, I think that it won't be a late night, I hope.
Yeah, I don't.
So it's not something where we're going to sort of sit here and have a lot of time to sort of churn about, what's happening, who's up, who's down. But, there are there's at least a couple competitive aldermanic districts.
All right, real quick before we go. I want one word from you, one word answer from you. The word is either Panelides or Buckley. Who's going to win this mayor's election?
I am always wrong. So I'm going to say Panelides.
There you go. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Doctor.
No problem.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.